All right, everybody, welcome to Know Your Pieces. Again, my name is Billy. In this section, we are going to cover the name of each piece, how each of those pieces moves and attacks, how to make good threats and physically do the capture movement in chess, and then a note on your most important pieces. All right, so starting with the name of each piece, right here we've got the rook on the very right, looks like a castle. You start the game with two rooks, and they are long-range pieces. And we've got our bishop. Our bishop is right here in the middle. Your bishop is a long-range piece as well, and you start the game with two. We've got our queen right here. You start the game with one queen, and it is a long-range piece. And then you've got your king right here. You only have one king in your chess game, and it is a short-range piece. We've got our knight right here, which looks like a horse. You start the game with two knights, and that's a mid-range piece. And we've got our pawn here in the back. You start the game with 8 pawns, which is very nice. And that is a short range piece. All right. So let's hop over to a chessboard. We're going to look at how each of these actually moves and attacks. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the rook. The rook is a very straightforward thinker. It moves very linearly, vertically, and horizontally. So let me show you here. The rook can move up, down, left, and right as far as you want, as long as it's not blocked by any pieces. Now that includes your pieces or your opponent's pieces. So that just means that it cannot jump over anything, okay? All right, so from here, we could travel all the way up here. Okay, alternatively, we could travel all the way down. Okay, or we could come all the way to the left or all the way to the right, okay? Now, its movement range is the same as its attack range, so let's look at some attacking here. So we see that we have an opponent bishop right here in line with our rook. So we are able to swing on over and capture that bishop if we wanted. We also have a knight down here, a black knight in the same attack line as this rook. So if we wanted, we could come down and snag the knight as well. Now, if you're not playing online, you're playing in person, you just make a capture by moving your piece over to the piece you want to capture, occupying that same square, and then taking the opponent piece off the board, okay? So that is how that is done. And we could do the same thing down here with the knight. Okay, so that is rook movement and rook capture. Let's head over to the bishop. Now the bishop moves very differently than a rook. The bishop actually moves along its diagonal slants. So this bishop here could move forward or backward as far as you want to move it, so long as it's not blocked by any pieces. Okay. Now, one thing to note is that you start the game with a dark square bishop and a light square bishop. That just means that one of them is going to start here on a dark square, and one of them is going to start here on a light square. Now, I say that because sometimes people move pieces and accidentally slide them into a different line, and they end up here on a different color square. So just know your dark square bishop is always going to travel along the dark squares. Okay. And your light square bishop, if you can imagine one right here, would only have the option to travel across the light squares, okay? All right, so let's look at bishop capturing. So its capture range is the same as its movement range. So if we look over here, we've got a black rook in line with this bishop diagonal slant. So if it were white to move here, we could slide on over and capture this rook. All right. Let's go ahead and move over to queen movement and capture. So the queen is your most powerful chess piece, and it moves like a rook and a bishop combined. So that means, like the rook, it can attack vertically and horizontally as far as you want. And it can also attack like the bishop does, diagonally. Okay? So as we put these arrows on the board, you're going to notice that your queen has an insane attack range. Okay? So anything in line with it, it's able to threaten. So let's look at some options here to capture. So I've spread out some pieces here so you can see everything available to the queen. Now because it does attack vertically, horizontally, and diagonally, it's got a line on anything that surrounds it. So that's the first thing to note. Okay, so anything around the queen is able to be attacked. So we see that this black pawn right here, we could capture if we wanted. All right, we're also in line with this knight over here. We could capture that if we wanted. We could swing down and capture this knight if we wanted. We could grab this bishop, or we could capture this rook over here. So a lot of options with your queen, okay? And we've got the king. Your king moves one square in any direction, again, as long as it's not blocked by anything. So I'll just make a move here. So from this corner, this white king could move here, here, or one square up. Okay, so we'll make one movement here. And we'll make another movement for black over here, just one square in any direction. All right, one thing to note about the king is that it can never step into danger. What that means is, let's look at our white queen here. We know that our queen attacks diagonally, so that means it's attacking this whole dark line right here. So if it was black's turn to move, I'll just make it black's turn. Black is not able to step into that line that our queen attacks, not able to step into danger. Now that danger is called check. So check is just when a king is in the attack range of an opposing piece, okay? Because of that, I'll show you here, kings are never able to step next to one another because they do attack one square in every direction. So if your kings are next to each other, just know that there's been a misstep on the board and you will very likely need to redo that move. Another thing to note is that kings are never captured on the chessboard. Checkmate ends the game. So once that position has been reached, which we'll talk about in a later video, the game simply ends. So you're never going to actually capture the king and then take it off the board. So let's look at some attacking from the king. So we've got some pieces around this white king here. Now we know because we do step one square in every direction, we could come down and capture this rook. Okay, we could come up and capture this knight. Now, one thing to note here is that we're really not able to capture this knight right here. The reason for that is if I slide it over, maybe you can see, if we were here on this square, we would be in line with this rook, and that would be in danger. So we're not legally allowed to make that capture. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you move your king around. Just know that you're not able to step into check positions. Okay, so let's look at the knight. The knight is my favorite piece personally because it is a very unique moving piece. So starting from a vertical or horizontal square, meaning starting from here, 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 or here, we're just going to count over 2 and over 1. That's the phrase you want to remember. Over 2, over 1. So what I mean by that is, if we're going to start here counting, we're going to count 1, 2 squares, and then we're going to count 1 square adjacent from where we are. So up 1 or down 1. So from here, we know that this knight can land here, or this knight can land here. Okay, now we can do that in any direction. So I'm actually going to walk through, if you want to skip this part, if you get that, that's totally fine. But if you want to walk through more of knight movement, that's what I'm going to go over now. So starting from here, we can go 1, 2, and over 1. And again, 1, 2, and over 1. So we know that this knight can go here or here as well. All right. It can also step over this way, 1, 2, and 1, or 1, 2, and 1. So it can go here or here. And then again, down, we could go 1, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 1. Okay, so we know that this knight could step here or here. Okay. Now, it is the only piece that can jump over pieces, but unlike checkers, you're not threatening everything you jump over. You're actually only attacking on the squares that you end up on the squares that you land on, okay? So let's look at some of those attack positions here. So from here, we've got a rook, a pawn, and a queen that can all be captured by this knight here in the middle. So let's look at that. So we can go 1, 2. We know we can go over 1, we could do 1, 2, 1, and again down here, 1, 2, 1. Okay, so from this position, this knight could capture this rook, this pawn, or this queen, and you're probably going to snag the queen because it is the more powerful piece. All right, so that is knight movement and attack. And we are going to give you a resource that will help you kind of get familiar with each of these pieces, okay? All right, let's look at pawns, and pawns are very different. So let's go ahead and look at how these move. So if your pawn has not moved yet on the chessboard, it has the option of moving 1 square or 2 squares, whichever you'd like to move it. So if we look here, the computer's going to tell me I can move this pawn 1 square or 2 squares, so we can just make a move there. Same thing for this one. I'm going to make a move for black. Now, if I come down here to my pawns, I've got the option again, look, 1 square or 2 squares for each of these pawns. Now, after it's moved its first move, the pawn is only going to move 1 square at a time down the board. And as it only travels in one direction in the same file that it starts on. Okay, it's just going to travel down the board. Now, it attacks differently, though, than it moves. It's the only piece that does that. So it attacks forward 1 square diagonally. So this pawn here is attacking this square and this square, okay? This pawn here, because it's on the edge, is only attacking this square, forward 1 square diagonally, okay? This one over here is attacking here, and this one here is attacking here, and then defending this square because we have a pawn on there right now, all right? So I want to show you some positions here where you can see it in action. So this pawn here, we know attacks forward 1 square diagonally, so it's attacking here and here. Now if you'll notice, there's a black rook here, so we are able to capture this if it was white's turn. All right? Now I'm going to go back one. This knight is actually safe from this pawn because it's 2 squares away diagonally, and we're only going to attack the 1 square diagonally. All right? So we'll go ahead and make that capture and make a move for black. Now it's white to move again here. If we wanted, we could move this pawn 2 squares because it hasn't moved yet. Now from here, you'll notice this pawn is attacking here and here, which means we're now threatening this knight. Okay, so I want you to start getting comfortable seeing how your pawns attack. So if black was to ignore this threat and not move their knight to safety, in the next move, we could just capture this knight. Okay? Now I'm going to back up here a little bit. I do want you to see something while we're here. So one of the mistakes I see beginner players make a lot is that it's tricky for them to see how their opponent's pawns attack towards them. Because if you look here, these pawns are actually all traveling towards you on the chessboard. Okay? Now because of that, their forward 1 square diagonally is actually here and here. And a lot of times I see players move their pieces onto these squares, which aren't safe squares. So just keep in mind this knight right now, remember we can move over 2 over 1, so we could go here, over 2, and then over 1, here and here. So this knight could travel here and here, but just keep in mind that as you move your pieces and as you advance them towards your opponent's side of the board, these are not going to be safe squares for you, okay? So let's go ahead and look at something else with the pawns. One thing to note too is that it doesn't matter how strong your opponent's pieces are, if they're within the range of your pawns, you can still capture them, okay? Now remember, we're never going to capture kings. Checkmate is going to end the game. But if it's a queen against a pawn and it's your turn, notice that this pawn attacks here and here. We can just capture that queen, no problem. Like, that's totally within your rights. All right, one thing I do want to share before we move back to the slides is that not everything you can capture is necessarily a threat. So in this position, we're going to come back here and look at this. This rook is in line with this bishop and in line with this knight, so we can capture them. Now, if we look around these pieces and across the board, we see that nothing is defending this bishop or this knight. So those would just be free pieces. That would be free material that we could capture, okay? Now we are in line with this pawn as well, And while we could capture it, it's not necessarily a threat because it's defended by this king. So if we were to come over and capture this pawn, we know that the king attacks one square in every direction, so he could just capture this rook, and we don't really want to lose that piece at this stage in the game, okay? So just keep in mind that not everything you can do is necessarily a good move. All right, so now I know on your most important pieces, the queen is your most powerful piece, okay? You saw the range on the board. The queen range is extensive. Because of that, I see a lot of beginner players get their queens out early, like in the first few moves of the game, and they end up getting their queen captured, okay? It's not a good idea to really develop your queen too early. It's around a lot of threats, it's around your opponent's pieces, and a lot of times, most of the time, it ends up getting captured. Okay, the other reason it's not great is that what sometimes happens is you get your queen out, your opponent develops a piece that threatens your queen, so you have to move your queen again to safety. Then they get another piece out, which also threatens your queen, and you have to move your queen again to safety. And what can end up happening is your opponent ends up developing 3 or 4 pieces, and all you've moved in the game is your queen and a pawn. And it's a lot harder for you to come back in that game because you're so underdeveloped while your opponent is using all of their pieces together. Okay, so try not to get your queen out too early if you can help it. The other thing to note is the king, while not your most powerful piece, is your most important piece. Okay, checkmate is going to end the game cold stop. So keep your king as safe as possible, okay? All right, so to recap, we talked about the name of each piece. We've got the rook, we've got the knight, we've got the bishop, we've got the pawn, we've got the queen, and we've got the king. We talked about how they each move and how they attack. So we know our rook is going to move vertically and horizontally. Our knight, we talked about over 2 over 1. Our bishop is going to move and attack along diagonals. Our queen is going to move and attack along verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. Our king is going to move and attack one square in any direction. And our pawn movement is on its first move, it can move 1 or 2 squares. After its first move, it's only 1 square at a time forward. And then it's going to attack forward 1 square diagonally. And we talked about making good threats on the board and then the physical movement of capturing pieces. And we talked a bit about your queen being your most powerful piece and your king being the most important piece. All right, so your action step for this section is to okay, so the slide says 10. I'm actually going to cut that in half for you, so you've got less homework. I would like you to make 5 piece movements and piece captures. So what do I mean by that? I mean take a piece. You can start with a rook or wherever you want to start. Put it in the center of a board. It can be a physical board or an online board, okay? Whichever one you want. And make 5 consecutive moves with that piece, okay? So you start getting comfortable with how the pieces move. Then put it back in the middle of the board, surround it with opposing colored pieces, and then make 5 consecutive captures, okay? Now, this may seem really silly, but I promise it's going to help you. Here's what it's going to do. It's going to connect some dots in your brain and allow you to see actual captures and opportunities in live games that you play. Okay, so if this is your first time learning the pieces or it's your first time in years or in decades, do this. Like, do this activity. Just practice making those physical movements and then practice making those individual captures so that you're not missing anything when you're actually playing people, okay? So, yeah, thanks for joining me in this lesson. If you've got questions about anything that we talked about or anything else in chess and you want some direction, you can email me at hello@opendoorchess.com and I will respond to you as soon as I'm able. And then if you are looking for a new chessboard or some other chess gear, there is a link in the description that you can explore some chess products from a company that I've bought from before and I stand behind. And then besides that, I look forward to seeing you guys out there on chess.com or Lichess. And yeah, happy playing.